Hello everyone and welcome to the 51st Cocoa programming tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to be covering how we can work with view-based NSTableViews in Cocoa. So a little disclaimer before we get started with this one. This is a macOS 10.7 and above only feature. So if you're running if you're not running Lion and Mountain Lion or something better at a later point in time, then you're kind of out of luck. So Snow Leopard and below, you can follow along with this tutorial, but you won't be able to make anything in it. So you can listen to my lovely voice if you'd like, but if you want to learn how to make table views for your own Mac, Snow Leopard or below, then you can check out the earlier NSTableView tutorials, which are not view-based. Anyway, also on that note, if you haven't watched the earlier NSTableView tutorials, make sure you do that as well, because I'm assuming in this tutorial that by now you understand how data source and delegate methods work, and also just the basic understanding of how an NSTableView works, which I went into much more detail on in the first series. Anyway, with that said, we're going to go ahead and just start this tutorial. So, I'll also, for background on what we're doing in this tutorial, view-based NSTableViews are different than what we first learned about, which were the cell-based NSTableViews, and the difference is basically in the name. The cell-based table views, every single row was made up of an NS cell. An NS cell is kind of this awkward class that Apple has to draw content, but it doesn't really do the same things that views do. So it doesn't handle user interaction, and it doesn't have a lot of the overhead that views have, basically all the extra features. So what the issue with this though is that you can't really customize NSCell without subclassing it. So if you wanted to make, this complicated or complex row on your NSTableView, with a image and maybe text field at the top, and then maybe a multi-line text field below that, and then you want to have a timestamp on the right or a button, then you're kind of pushing your luck with then you've got a subclass NSCell, and to make that user interface would probably be very complicated. So to say the least, what we have now, which is kind of a better option, is a view-based NSTableView, which allows you to basically design the rows ahead of time. And you can do this right in Interface Builder. You can design the look and feel of your individual rows, and then you can just basically fill them in with code. So you can just kind of fill in the images, fill in the text with with code. So, but the nice thing is you can design the look of your rows with views, and with views you can also add pretty much whatever kind of other view you want. So you can add buttons and all that good stuff. Alright, so with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll go ahead and search for table and just drag out the top option, which is TableView, and we drag it out like so. And then once we have that, we'll go to the attributes inspector, and right now we're selected on the NSTableView, so we'll select again to get to the table view. And you can see in the attributes inspector here under content mode we have cell based, but we want to switch this to view based. So we're also going to change the column number just to be 1 instead of 2. Doesn't really matter. I think by the end of this tutorial you should be able to apply what you learn in this tutorial anyway, so it shouldn't be an issue. But yeah, that's that. Alright, so now that we have this, we're going to change the cell type in here, so we can just delete this. And we're going to throw in, it's just a kind of a special pre-made cell. It's an NSTableCellView, and these are a subclass of NSView, and they just represent, really all they allow you to do is kind of add, they have an outlet for an image and an outlet for a NS text field. So it's kind of just a nice subclass that Apple gives us to work with in that. So there we go. We go ahead and drag in our image and text table cell view, which you can find if you still are searching for table. It's right below the table view. Alright, so now that we have this, we can basically design it as we'd like to see. So I'll show you what we're actually going to make in this tutorial, which is basically this layout right here. So you have an image view, in a row, and then we also have the name of basically each flag on this row. And basically where I'm getting all this information from is from these are all files in the Finder. They're all image files, and all I did was take out the extension and just leave the name. So we have the image, and then we have the name of that file as well. And we're just displaying that in individual rows in our table view. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and design our each individual row. So what we want to do is change our height to be 50, so we can do this in the size inspector once we've selected our view, and change that to 50, and then we just go right in and change whatever we want here. So we'll change our image to be 47 by 47. Not that it really matters, but it just fits in the cell that I've created. And move this down, and we'll realign it so that it's with the image. There we go. Alright, so now we have our beautiful view over here, and this is our NSTable cell view that we've customized to look like this. And basically now the table view understands that this is what the rows will look like. Now the last step that we have to do is add different identifiers to this. So we did this in the past with the individual columns. So just select your table view, you just select 3 times, and that will get you to the NSTable column, and that's the column that we're currently in. And we want to change the identifier just to be main cell. It doesn't really matter, just remember what you call it, you'll need it for later. So I'm just going to call this main cell, and then I'm going to call this cell right here also main cell. I'm just calling it the same thing for convenience, but you'll see when we use this later. So anyway, make sure you label the column main cell and also the cell itself by selecting it main cell. Alright, and that identifier we will use later on. Alright, so now we have what our table view will look like, and now it's just our job to, of course, build it out and get what we want, right? We have to fill in all the great information for our table view using data source and delegate methods. So to do this, we have to go to our, I'm going to be working my AppDelegate for this tutorial, but it doesn't really matter which one you use. In this, I'm going to just add the NSTableView data source protocol and the NSTableView delegate protocol as well. And those, we just have 2 different methods, one from each, that we're going to implement in this application. Alright, so going to our AppDelegate.m, I'm just going to get rid of this. And what I'm going to do is add an NSMutable array. And this NSMutable array, I'm just going to call table contents. And this array is just going to hold on to each individual row for the data for each individual row for our table view. So what I'm going to do is basically, if you remember back to the first table view tutorials, right, every index of our NSMutable array represents the row we're on basically in our table view. So this would be row 0, which would also represent the 0th index in our NSMutable array. And as we go through, right, this would be the second index, second row, same idea. So the NSMutable array is going to contain the image information and the name as well for each row. So we can do this by holding on to NS dictionaries in our NSMutable array. So every object in our NSMutable array will be an NS dictionary, and the NS dictionary will contain an image, which we will use the key image for, and it's also going to contain a name, which we'll use the key name for. Alright, so let's go ahead and get all this stuff set up with our awake from nib. So this might be maybe almost the most complicated part of this whole application that we're building, but nonetheless, it shouldn't be too hard to explain. So of course we have to initialize our table contents, so alloc init NSMutable array. And with that, we're going to go ahead and now figure out how to get the contents of these images. So where this is located is if you go into your Finder, go to your Pictures section. In the Pictures section, you should have a section called iChat Icons, and then we're going to use the flags for our example. And basically, this is just a folder with all pictures. If you want to try this tutorial out, you don't have to use the path that I use here. You can use whatever path you want. Just make sure that the folder you have only contains image files. And that's going to be important because I'm not going to be checking to see that they're not. So just make sure that for this tutorial's sake, if you want to use some other images or another folder with images, make sure that all the files that you're using are images. Alright, now with that said, what I want to do is create an NS string called path, and this is going to represent the path for our folder, so the path to the folder. Alright, so I can get this very easily by going to the Finder, and I'm going to drag out the flags folder, just drop it into Xcode, and now we have our path to the flags folder. So this is the path that we have to get to those iChat icons. So if for whatever reason you can't find this path in your pictures folder, because this is actually just an alias to something else, but this is the actual path if you want to copy that down, or like I said, feel free to try your own folder with pictures. Alright, so now that we have the path to those flags, what we want to be able to do is we want to basically enumerate through that folder and find every image file, right? We want to be able to create a bunch of dictionaries that contain these images and then the name of the images as well. So how we can do this is using a class that I haven't actually explained yet, which is a very useful class called NSFileManager. NSFileManager is basically the class that you can use to go through your file system in macOS. So anytime you're kind of going to dig through your system to grab a file, this is the class that you would use to do that. Although I don't know if this works with sandboxing, but we're not ignoring sandboxing. This is the class you would want to use. Alright, so with that said, how we can go about doing this is we're going to create our NSFileManager, and we're just going to get the default file manager. Now that gets the file manager. It's just basically an object that allows us to point somewhere in our computer to some directory. And what we want to do now is we want to create another class object, or another object called NSDirectoryEnumerator. Just call it directory enumerator, or enum. And basically what this thing is going to do is it's going to enumerate through whatever path we give it. So I'll explain that in just a second, but we're going to use a method in NSFileManager called enumerator@path, which returns obviously an NSDirectoryEnumerator for a given path. So we'll just pass in the path that we just created. Alright, so how this looks visually, if we want to look at our Finder for a second, basically we have this folder called flags, and it contains all these flags. And so what happens here is we tell our NSFileManager, create a file manager, and then we use this method enumerator@path. We pass in the path of this flags folder, so it gives us this location where all these images are. And the NSDirectoryEnumerator is just going to allow us to enumerate through all these files. So what we can do is it'll basically start at this file here, and then we can just keep calling the next object, and it'll just keep fetching for us the next object in these things. And that's really annoying, but yeah, it'll just keep going through all of the image files that we have in the folder that we pass to it. Alright, so now that I've said that, we want to basically just create, we have all the information that we need basically to get to the information that we need for our flags. So I'm just going to create an NS string called file here, and what we're going to do is create a while loop, and we're going to get the name, basically the file name at for our everything that our directory enumerator goes through. So I'm just going to say directory enum next object, and like I said, next object is just going to keep going to the next file. So it'll start in the flags folder, and when we say next object, it'll pick that first object in the flags folder, and every time we call next object, it's just getting the name of that file. So in our example here, when we call next object, and I must have got rid of that thing, but basically next object will just get us the name of that file. So it'll get the name of whatever file is in the flag. So if it was Argentina not .jpeg or .png, whatever it is, then it would get that file name, like so. Alright, so the thing that we have to do though is we have to put this path that we have here and the file name together to get the total path for the path to the image, basically. So we're going to create another NSString, and we'll just call this one file path. And we'll take the path and we'll take a string by appending format. And what we're going to do is append whatever file we get from our enumerator here onto our path. So we'll start with a slash and then %@, and we'll throw in our file, like so. So this will get us the path to every image that's in the flags folder. And this is what we need because we need to now tell the when we go to create an NS image, we need to tell the path where this picture is located. So now this is the file path, or the path to our every single picture as we go through this while loop. Alright, so we'll create an NS dictionary here, and we'll just call this obj. And we're going to start with the first key being image. And the object that we're going to have is an NS image. So NS image alloc init by referencing file. And this just takes the path that we're going to be using. So we just pass in file path, like so. Alright, and now that we have that, that's anytime we want to get the image at this file path, we're just going to ask our dictionary object for the image key. Now if we want to get the name of this, then we'll do a similar thing. We'll just take the file name, right? And we get that right here. So this NSString called file is the name of that file. We can go a little bit further with this though, just looking at our picture. We're going to chop off the extension to our file name, and we can easily do this by saying string by deleting path extension. So this will return a new string by deleting the path extension. Obvious, I guess. Alright, so now that we have our dictionary all set up, we just have to add it to the table contents. And we can do that by saying add object, obj. There we go. So now we have a dictionary object that contains a reference to the file path. So basically we pass in the file path to an image, and then it creates an NS image object with that file path. And then we also have the name, and that just represents the name of the file. Alright, so that should be enough for setting up the table contents, and that'll get us all the images we need. Alright, so now let's go to the data source and delegate methods. So what we want to do is implement the first, I believe this is a data source method, number of rows in TableView. And we've seen this one in the past. This is very obvious. You're just telling the TableView how many rows you have. And of course, it's the same as the number of objects in table contents. So we can get this by saying table contents count. And of course, we have to return this, like so. Alright, so that's one method down, and the last method is obviously more complicated, but this is how we set up the actual cells. So the method that we use is TableView, view for table column, row. And you might have to search a little bit for that one, but I'm sure you'll find it in there somewhere. Anyway, this method, as it might kind of imply by its return type, is returning the view for a specific table column's row. So what this means is that we have to return the specific row that this table column, or this table view basically, is going to display at this column and at this row. So this is really not too bad, but what we're doing is we're going to ask the table view to give us that nice little cell that we already set up in Interface Builder, and then our job is to simply fill the information in, so the image view and that text view, or the text field that we have, with the dictionary objects in table contents. So this isn't all that bad. We just are first going to get that object that's in our table contents. So we can just say NSDictionary flag, and we will get the table contents, and we're going to get the index of row. And this is just using this subscripting notation. It's the same as saying object at index row for the table contents. All right, so we get the specific dictionary at the specific row, and that's represented by this flag. Great. So the next step is to get those identifiers that we set on the table column and the specific cell. So to do this, we're just going to say identifier gets, we're going to ask the table column right here. So table column, and we're going to ask it for its identifier. So if you had multiple table columns, for example, this part is very important because you'll want to know which identifier you're talking about, right? So you would call different columns, you would name them different things, and depending on the identifier you get back, then you would know what information you want to fill in. Since we only have one table column, this part's really not necessary, but I'm just showing you in case you're going to use this with more than one column, which you very well might. The next part is to test the identifier, and to do this we can say is it equal to string main cell, and basically that just means that we're in the table column that we set up, right? We called that specific table column main cell. So that's all we're doing here. If we're in that column, and of course we will be, then we just want to get that nice, we want to get the view that we created in Interface Builder for that specific table column, right? Or the specific identifier that we set up for it. So this is pretty easy to do. We just need to say NSTableView, which represents the view that we created in our table view. Each row is a NSTableView, and we're just going to call it cell view. And what we can do is we can ask the table view to give us back this specific view that we already set up. So we can just say table view. We're using this parameter right here. This is the same table view that's asking us for this information. So we'll say table view and make a view, so make view with identifier and owner. So obviously this will make us a view with a specific identifier. So it'll give us back the view that is associated with this identifier. And this is main cell. And the owner in this case is just us, right? Alright, so this will give us back what we created in our main menu nib, which was this specific cell, and because we gave it the identifier main cell, that's what we're going to be getting back when we ask for a view with this identifier main cell. Alright, so now our job's pretty easy. We just have to fill out the information that is in this cell. And NSTableView already comes pre-made. I think I already said this, but it already comes pre-made with an image view outlet and a text or an NSText field outlet. So if we right click on this table cell view, we can see that it already has these connections to the text field and the image view. All right, so we're going to use those objects in the NSTableView. We're going to use the image view and the text field because they're already made for us. So with that, we can easily access these by saying cellView.textField, and we'll just set the string value on the text field. So we can do that by taking our flag object, the NSDictionary object that we took from our table contents, and we're just going to say flag, and we'll get the key that is represented by the name, like so. And the next part is to say cellView.imageView, and what we're going to do for this is just set the image. So we set image, and the image we want is also in that flag object under the key image. And again, we set all this stuff up right here when we put the image and name into our table contents. Alright, so that's all we have to do to set that up, and of course the last part is to return it, right? It wants to know the view that it's going to display, so we just return our cell view. And if something else goes wrong, then I guess we would return nil, but theoretically there shouldn't be anything else because we only have this one table column, and it should be called main cell. Alright, so now that we have that, we are good to check this out. So I'm just going to delete this quickly, and yeah, go ahead and see that we actually got it working. Go ahead and run this, and hopefully nothing goes wrong. And oh, we did forget something very important. So what I forgot was we need to actually tell the TableView where it's getting this information from. And this is, I don't know, I tend to forget this for whatever reason, but it's not a big deal. All we have to do is, of course, tell the TableView the data source and the delegate where it's getting its information from, right? So all I did was, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I click on this once, click on it twice, and what I want to do is I want to connect my TableView's data source to our AppDelegate, and of course I also want to connect the delegate of our TableView to our AppDelegate as well. And now, of course, it will ask the AppDelegate for that information. So let's run this again, and there we go. That's what I wanted to see. And I accidentally made this, I think I stretched my TableView out too much. But anyway, here we have all the different flags. So we can select these, and we can't really do anything with them yet, but it does show the idea of how view-based table views work, and they're quite simple to make, right? I can build the view in whatever way we want. We can set the text to whatever color we want. It doesn't really matter. We're pretty free to do as we please. And there's a lot more you can do with view-based table views. You can animate their motions and a lot of cool things that we might get to in another tutorial. I don't know how interested people are in learning this stuff, but I think view-based table views are definitely something that if you're making any application with a table view, I highly suggest that you work with view-based table views, because they will make your life much easier if you're making a very interesting table view. Anyway, that's all that I had to show you for this lesson 51. If you have any other questions on this, feel free to leave your questions in the comments section below. Please subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in another upcoming tutorial. See you then.